Yo，大家好，
大家好，
又到我哋讀你聽嘅時候。咁我哋今日繼續讀呢個遠大前程啊，狄更斯嘅遠大前程第32節啦，我哋第31次錄音。咁上回我哋講到咧，即係阿 Pip 咧就去捧場，去睇 play 同個朋友，咁
睇下 Mr. Watson。
咁睇完 play 少不免要去後台同人哋祝賀一番啦，寒暄啦咁佢即係好多揞住良心講嘅嘢啦，盡量揾啲
教佢講啊嘛，
盡量揾啲優點去講啦，話佢演得好好啊，佢故事寫得好好啊，啲觀眾又好明啊咁實際上係一個咩嘅製作咧？我諗即係都係好草根嘅啫，即係都係好細規模嘅，但係都唔錯啦，叫做有個劇啦。不過呢個同個主線似乎目前嚟講就好似唔係好大關聯啦。阿 Pip 亦都似乎冇咩興趣去喺一個戲班度做，係嘛？佢心思只係 estella 啫。咁點樣可以同 estella 一齊先？呢個最大嘅問題啊嘛，係嘛？咁阿 Pip 竟然可以抽空去睇 play 嘅，緊唔緊張㗎？究竟係嘛？咁希望即係第32節，即係希望可以將個故事重回正軌啦，係嘛？即係加快啲嘅節奏啦，再雖然個節奏已經唔錯都好啦。咁我第32節好唔好啊？我繼續讀。One day, when I was busy with my books and Mr. Pocket, I received a note by the post.The mere outside of which threw me into a great flutter, for, though I had never seen the handwriting in which it was addressed, I divined whose hand it was. It had no set beginning, as Dear Mr. Pip, or Dear Pip, or Dear Sir, or Dear anything, but ran thus. I am to come to London the day after tomorrow by the midday coach. I believe it was settled you should meet me. At all events, Miss Havisham has that impression, and I write in obedience to it.She sends you her regard. Yours, Estella. 即係個語氣都係好生硬。即係我唔可以話客氣，我唔可以話佢客氣咯。即係佢係好直接嗰啲咧。即係喂 ，Miss Havisham 嘅意思嚟㗎。你而家係咪接我啊？即係咁咧，即係唔係嗰啲，即係唔可以話係禮貌咯，可以咁講。但係同一時間呢個就係 Estella 做翻佢自己。即係佢嘅語氣就係咁，就係佢對阿 Pip 就係咁直接咯，就係唔會留情面。If there had been time, I should probably have ordered several suits of clothes for this occasion. But as there was not, I was fain to be content with those I had. My appetite vanished instantly, and I knew no peace or rest until the day arrived. Not that its arrival brought me either, for then I was worse than ever, and began haunting the coach office in Wood Street, Cheapside, before the coach had left the Blue Ball in our town. For all that I knew this perfectly well, I still felt as if it were not safe to let the coach office be out of my sight longer than 5 minutes at a time, and in this condition of unreason, I had performed the first half hour of a watch of 4 or 5 hours, when Wemmick ran against me.就一路都喺個車站度等。Hello, Mr. Pip, said he. How do you do? I should hardly have thought this was your beat. I explained that I was waiting to meet somebody who was coming up by coach, and I inquired after the castle and the aged. Both flourish, thank ye, said Wemmick, and particularly the aged. He is in wonderful feather. He'll be 82 next birthday. I have a notion of firing 82 times if the neighbourhood shouldn't complain, and that cannon of mine should prove equal to the pressure. However, this is not London talk. Where do you think I'm going to? To the office, said I, for he was tending to that direction. Next thing to it, returned Wemmick. I'm going to Newgate. We are in a banker's parcel case just at present, and I have been down the road taking a squint at the scene of action, and thereupon must have a word or two with our client. Did your client commit the robbery? I asked. Bless your soul and body, no, answered Wemmick very drily. But he is accused of it. So might you or I be. Either of us might be accused of it, you know. Only neither of us is, I remarked. "Yeah," said Wemmick, touching me on the breast with his forefinger. "You're a deep one, Mr. Pip. Would you like to have a look at Newgate? Have you time to spare?" I had so much time to spare that the proposal came as a relief, notwithstanding its irreconcilability with my latent desire to keep my eye on the coach office. Muttering that I would make the inquiry whether I had time to walk with him, I went into the office and ascertained from the clerk that the nicest precision and much to the trying of his temper, the earliest moment at which the coach could be expected, which I knew beforehand quite as well as he. I then rejoined Mr. Wemmick, and affecting to consult my watch, and to be surprised by the information I had received, accepted his offer. We were at Newgate in a few minutes, and we passed through the lodge where some fetters were hanging up on the bare walls among the prison rules, into the interior of the jail. At that time, jails were much neglected, and a period of exaggerated reaction consequent on all public wrongdoing, and which is always its heaviest and longest punishment, was still far off. So, felons were not lodged and fed better than soldiers, and seldom set fire to their prisons with the excusable object of improving the flavour of their soup. It was visiting time when Wemmick took me in. An apartment was going his rounds of beer, and the prisoners, behind bars and yards, were buying beer and talking to friends, and a frowsy, ugly, disorderly, depressing scene it was. It struck me that Wemmick walked among the prisoners much as gardener might walk among his plants. This was first put into my head by his seeing a shoot that had come up in the night, and saying, "What, Captain Tom, are you there? Ah, indeed. And also, is that Black Bill behind the cistern? Why I didn't look for you these 2 months. How do you find yourself?" Equally in his stopping at the bars and attending to anxious whisperers, always singly. Wemmick, with his post office in an immovable state, looked at them while in conference, as if he were taking particular notice of the advance they had made, since last observed, towards coming out in full blow at their triumph. He was highly popular, and I found that he took the familiar department of Mr. Jaggers's business, though something of the state of Mr. Jaggers's hung about him too, forbidding approach beyond certain limits. His personal recognition of each successive client was comprised in a nod, and his settling his hat a little easier on his head with both hands, and then tightening the post office, and putting his hands in his pockets. In 1 or 2 instances there was a difficulty respecting the raising of fees, and then Mr. Wemmick, backing as far as possible from the insufficient money produced, said, "It's no use, my boy. I'm only a subordinate. I can't take it. Don't go on in that way with a subordinate. If you are unable to make up your quantum, my boy, you had better address yourself to a principal. There are plenty of principals in the profession, you know, and what is not worth the while of one may be worth the while of another. That's my recommendation to you, speaking as a subordinate. Don't try on useless measures. Why should you? Now, who's next?" Thus we walked through Wemmick's greenhouse, until he turned to me and said, "Notice the man I shall shake hands with." I should have done so without the preparation, as he had shaken hands with no one yet. Almost as soon as he had spoken, a portly, upright man, in a well-worn olive-coloured frock coat, with a peculiar pallor overspreading the red in his complexion, and eyes that went wandering about when he tried to fix them, came up to a corner of the bars and put his hand to his hat, which had a greasy and fatty surface like cold broth, with a half-serious and half-jocose military salute. "Colonel, to you," said Wemmick. "How are you, Colonel?" "All right, Mr. Wemmick." "Everything was done that could be done, but the evidence was too strong for us, Colonel." "Yes, it was too strong, sir, but I don't care." No, said Wemmick coolly. "You don't care." Then turning to me, "Serve His Majesty this man, was a soldier in the line and bought his discharge." I said, "Indeed?" And the man's eyes looked at me, and then looked over my head, and then looked all around me, and then he drew his hand across his lips and laughed. "I think I shall be out of this on Monday, sir," he said to Wemmick. "Perhaps," returned my friend, "but there's no knowing." "I'm glad to have the chance of bidding you goodbye, Mr. Wemmick," said the man, stretching out his hand between 2 bars. "Thank ye. said Wemmick, shaking his hands with him. Same to you, Colonel. If what had upon me when taken had been real, Mr. Wemmick, said the man, unwilling to let his hand go, I should have asked the favour of your wearing other ring, in acknowledgment of your attentions. I'll accept the will for the deed, said Wemmick. By the by, you were quite a pigeon fancier. The man looked up at the sky. I am told you had a remarkable breed of tumblers. Could you commission any friend of yours to bring me a pair, if you've no use for them? It shall be done, sir. All right, said Wemmick. They shall be taken care of. Good afternoon, Colonel. Goodbye. They shook hands again, and as we walked away, Wemmick said to me, a coiner, a very good workman. The recorder's report is made today, and he is sure to be executed on Monday. Still, you see, as far as it goes, a pair of pigeons are portable property all the same. With that, he looked back and nodded at his dead plan, and then cast his eyes about him in walking out of the yard, as if he were considering that other port would go best his place. As we came out of the prison through the lodge, I found that the great importance of my guardian was appreciated by the turnkeys, no less than by those whom they held in charge. Well, Mr. Wemmick, said the turnkey, who kept us between the two studded and spiked lodge gates, and who carefully locked one before he unlocked the other, what's Mr. Jaggers going to do with the waterside murder? Is he going to make it manslaughter, or what's he going to make of it? Why don't you ask him? Returned Wemmick. Oh, yes, I dare say, said the turnkey. Now, that's the way with them here, Mr. Pip, remarked Wemmick, turning to me with his post office elongated. They don't mind what they ask of me, the subordinate, but you'll never catch them asking any questions of my principal. Is this young gentleman one of the apprentices of articled ones of your office? Asked the turnkey, with a grin at Mr. Wemmick's humour. There he goes again, you see, cried Wemmick. I told you so. Ask another question of the subordinate before his verse is dry. Well, supposing Mr. Pip is one of them. Why then, said the turnkey, grinning again, he knows what Mr. Jagger is. Yah, cried Wemmick, suddenly hitting out at the turnkey in a facetious way. You're as dumb as one of your own keys when you have to do with my principal, you know you are. Let us out, you old fox, or I'll get him to bring an action against you for false imprisonment. The turnkey laughed and gave us good day, and stood laughing at us over the spikes of the wicket when we descended the steps into the street. Mind you, Mr. Pip, said Wemmick, gravely in my ear as he took my arm to be more confidential, I don't know that Mr. Jaggers does a better thing than the way in which he keeps himself so high. He's always so high. His constant height is of a piece with his immense abilities. That colonel durst no more take leave of him than the turnkey durst ask him his intentions respecting the case. Then, between his height and them, he slips in his subordinate. Don't you see? And so he has him, soul and body. I was very much impressed, and not for the first time, by my guardian's subtlety. To confess the truth, I very heartily wished, and not for the first time, that I had had some other guardian of minor abilities. Mr. Wemmick and I parted at the office in Little Britain, where suppliants for Mr. Jagger's notice were lingering about as usual, and I returned to my watch in the street of the coach office with some 3 hours on end. I consumed the whole time in thinking how strange it was that I should be encompassed by all this taint of prison and crime, that in my childhood out on our lonely marshes on a winter evening I should have first encountered it, that it should have reappeared on 2 occasions, starting out like a stain that was faded out but not gone, that it should in its new way pervade my fortune and advancement. While my mind was thus engaged, I thought of the beautiful young Estella, proud and refined, coming towards me, and I thought with absolute abhorrence of the contrast between the jail and her. I wished that Wemmick had not met me, or that I had not yielded to him and gone with him, so that, of all days in the year on this day, I might not have had Newgate in my breath and on my clothes. I beat the prison dust off my feet as I sauntered to and fro, and I shook it out of my chest, and I exhaled its air from my lungs. So contaminated did I feel, remembering who was coming, that the coach came quickly after all, and I was not yet free from the soiling consciousness of Mr. Wemmick's conservatory, when I saw her face at the coach window and her hand waving to me. What was the nameless shadow which again in that one instant had passed? 唉，我為 estella 寄信嚟，可以見佢，終於可以見佢，點知唔係，成篇都唔係講 estella， 成篇就係講個傻仔喺度等 estella， 然之後又有個 take 個 side trip， 就同阿 Wemmick 走去監倉嗰度見佢哋一個客，見佢一個犯，一個軍人嚟嘅
Colonel
係啊 Colonel。咁其實我都唔係好清楚佢究竟發生咩事，但係我知道即係佢哋似乎係用一啲手段去令到呢個 Colonel 嘅出獄啊，或者佢可以掌握住呢個 Colonel 出唔出獄啦，又或者呢個 Colonel 將來嘅發展啦咁樣。咁但係佢哋係用咗一啲手段嘅咁樣。咁呢啲係會令到阿 Pip 即係叫做咩長見識咯，可以咁講啦。咁但係似乎對佢嚟講唔係一啲好好嘅教育咯，即係呢啲都係啲手段嘅嘢啦，啲嗱喳招咁樣。同埋即係呢度阿 Pip 自己呢度講啦，即係佢估唔到佢會即係由一個鄉下仔到而家出入啲地方，即係成日都喺度接觸到一啲關於 law and order 嘅嘢，即係佢自己都估唔到，但係其實佢不知不覺係學咗好多嘢，即係跟住 Wemmick 跟住 Jaggers 佢哋做嘢嘅方式，其實佢係學習咗，佢不知不覺其實佢係吸收咗。即係人與人之間，人對於制度，人對於社會所有嘢嘅一啲手段唔一定係光明正大嘅，但係就係為求達到目的，就係咩都做得出㗎啦。咁但係呢一刻佢都依然係朝思夢想咁喺度等住 estella， 然之後終於見到 estella 啦。終於見到佢，咁佢喺車站我諗加埋咁等咗都有5-6個鐘。佢甚至乎好似都唔知道架車正確嘅到達時間係幾多點。即係我唔知嗰個年代可唔可以清楚知道啦。佢就知道嗰日佢嚟，但係究竟幾多點咧佢都唔清楚。總之佢就喺度等到等咗幾個鐘，然之後有時間同阿 Wemmick 去監倉。又翻出嚟，再等幾個鐘，咁即係説明佢真係幾乎係做一日㗎咯喎。佢可能由朝早等到夜晚都唔出奇。咁但係唉，本來諗住今呢一節係咪有 estella 睇咧？點知都係冇。咁再等多次啦，好嘛？等到下一節再。
佢而家咪係咯，同佢 waving
下一節啊嘛。係咯。咁下一次再講啦。
好。
OK，繼續講。拜拜。